Considering COVID-19 leaves 80% of the people who get the virus completely unscathed, and of the 4% who die, considering those people are most likely elderly with underlying health conditions, or people with compromised immune systems, or other health conditions, seemingly now including asthma and those that vape and smoke, why has the government shut down life for the vital, healthy people in this country and set us on course for a Great Depression? It would have been less expensive and less disruptive had the elderly and infirm just been quarantined either at home or in camps while the rest of us lived our lives. Those elderly or infirm working could have been given some sort of disability or unemployment, and those infirm in college or in school could have taken online courses. But the government didn't take the wisest, least disruptive course of action. Why is that? Two obvious reasons exist. First, this government is filled with self-interested people lining pockets of themselves, their family, and people who keep them in power. To do this, the government needs the votes of the elderly and infirm. How is it that trillions of dollars have been pumped into propping up the prices of stock markets these past 2 weeks to ensure the billionaires and mega millionaires' bank accounts aren't depleted so that they can make payments on their jet airplanes, yachts, and overseas villa? And the ordinary person is to take solace that the government is providing nearly each person $1,200. Does the $1,200 payout equate with the millions each rich person has received? Obviously not. But there is a certain segment of the population that can be bought with those kind of peanuts. And it is that segment of the population that keeps the corrupt in power. Those satisfied voters are those who have no greater aspirations than survival. That is the selfish, greedy people. That population, or their relatives, or nursing home caretakers through absentee ballot, will go out and vote for the same corrupt elite over and over again. Those voters don't care about future healthy generations. They only care about themselves. Those selfish people are the elderly and infirm's relatives. Such selfish, greedy people include parents stuck with infirm kids because they weren't selfless enough to let their defective infants die without medical treatment, who demanded that their wheelchair-bound offspring, almost blind and with respiratory failure, without any hope of a normal life, be educated with able-bodied children despite the cost and inconvenience to the rest of society. Online education is just not good enough for those parents. Nope. Society must bend over backwards for beings whose existence would have mercifully expired had we a medical system not based on profit. Then there were the old geezers and codgers sexually harassing and assaulting the overwhelmingly female staff and helpless female patients in assisted living and nursing homes, who continue to vote for the corrupt as long as they get to live rent-free in assisted living and nursing homes instead of all-male facilities or prisons where they belong. The largest population of the needy and greedy are the elderly. Those who have no care other than to hang on life at all cost and any cost to the rest of us. more cost of living increases, less medical expenses, more tax breaks, more medical and pharmaceutical advances to keep their bodies from the reaper. To them, personal survival is all they have. The future of society or the planet is of no consequence. The elderly people who have been given more than enough time to accomplish all they could are afraid to die. And that is not my problem, and it shouldn't be yours either. And the politicians of the U.S. are willing to mortgage the future of the children of our society and the future of our planet to keep the elderly and infirm people alive at any and all cost. More elderly infirm voters, more voters for the corrupt. The planet is literally dying and cannot sustain life at the present rate of development. The politicians don't care. As long as in the present, the politicians' lives are filled with pleasure and riches. What benefit to keep the elderly alive at the cost of our current life enjoyment and loss of an economic future? Examine your sacrifice. Who exactly is the generation whose lives the government wants you to keep breathing? A lot of you don't know this, but people of my generation do. Since the 1970s, the mainly white middle age and elderly in the U.S. have been complaining about how children's diapers were filling the landfills. And they were complaining about how school taxes and taxes for higher education were just too much of a burden, and how taxpayers should not have to pay public assistance for people who are unmarried living together. And they would complain about how food stamps to feed poor children should be reduced, and about how those on public assistance should be sterilized. Yeah, these are the people who want you to keep them alive. Since the late 1970s, the middle-aged adults and older people have sacrificed the youth in our society and ratified union contracts that set lower pay rates and lower benefit packages for the younger incoming union members, while keeping the older workers' pay scale and benefits at premium levels. Now, the elderly oppress the youth and burden the rest of us. Youth wanting a college education must take out loans and graduate in a sea of debt. The cost of education, public assistance, and food assistance for the young back in the 70s through the turn of the century and beyond is nothing compared to the income and food maintenance and healthcare costs of keeping the Medicare generation surviving for decades into their 70s, 80s, and 90s. The landfills are filled with the elderly's diapers, and yet no one complains on radio or in the media. The elderly's sewage pollutes our environment, and it also pollutes our environment with the pharmaceuticals they ingest to keep them alive just one more day or one more week. The elderly get property tax breaks to squat in houses they can't afford, while those young who have families and are struggling to provide homes for the future generations have to make up the elderly's tax breaks and shortfalls. The elderly and disabled without resources get to live for decades on taxpayers' earnings in one-bedroom apartments with bathroom and kitchens in senior homes, sometimes cohabitating with others they're not married with, while the youth in colleges take out loans to live 2, 3, or 8 to a room while using communal showers and using a communal bathroom. Yet not a complaint about the absurd subsidization of the elderly at the expense of our future generations is raised in the media or on radio? Why has the government shut down the colleges for the elderly whose lives are for the most part over? Why has the government stopped the healthy in our society from working or running a business by prohibiting businesses from operating? Why has the government told healthy people they are not allowed to go out to eat, to see a movie, to shop at a mall, to drink in a club or a bar? People in nursing homes able to go out can make the choice to expose themselves or not. Why do healthy people have to suffer? Here is an example of people in assisted living, and we're not talking nursing homes, where the government demands you sacrifice to keep them alive. Where am I? Why am I here? Where am I? Why am I here? You're in your home. Go back to your room. Where is my room? Why am I here? Same person going into the dining hall and sitting down. That person, last part, he was looking at the name tags on the table. I don't know if he knew how to read. He had no clue where he was. He had no clue what he was. He had no clue what he was doing there. All right? Looking at the name tags. Here's another example of what you'll get. And this is an assisted living, not a nursing home. Got a picture. There are people on either side of this guy. Okay, this guy's in his, I don't know, 60s or 70s. It's like a guy you see in the homeless streets anywhere in Bethlehem or New York City. This guy is in a freaking assisted living place, and there's thousands like them. You got a cigarette? Another example, sitting, actually I'm standing, some woman comes up to me, thin as a rail, 80s, 90s, I have no clue. She goes, Mister, I want to talk to you because you're a man and you can do something. All right, so we already know this person's not in our world right now. She goes, Mister, I can't stay here. I don't know why I'm here, but I can't stay here because my mother and father won't let me sleep in anybody else's house. Okay? Now, those are just some of the types of people that vital people are being asked to make sacrifices so that they can live. So, and is that living? Or possibly, it's just surviving, isn't it? Millions of elderly and infirm are only alive at great cost to our society. Why should our government replace the pacemaker of an elderly man who doesn't know his name, who defecates in his pants, who can't change his diaper, who is incapable of taking a shower? Why should the government keep providing insulin injections and cholesterol and high blood pressure and blood thinner medications to a 300-pound woman who defecates in her diaper and growls and snaps and bites her caretakers? The release of these former sentient beings from our existence will provide room in our landfills, food and housing and heat and energy for the vital living among us, and there will be less pollution. All right? And that's if we don't provide them medical care to continue their existence. And at this point in time, we're not even talking about stopping unnecessary care for these people to extend their lives. We're talking about just let the rest of people live. Don't disrupt our lives and our economy. Let these people who should have been dead long ago, let them go. They're going to have to go at some point. Another theory of why the government has not put the infirm and elderly in camps and instead imprisoned the vital population and set us on a road to the Great Depression is because this is a test run. There are only about 6% of the country who are going to benefit from this power grab. Then there are the 20% of the elderly and infirm. They advocate human sacrifices if it could extend their life one day. Around 35% of this country is freaking brain dead. People are hoarding toilet paper for no reason. And now our landfills and refuse incinerators are being filled with rotten meat because these morons stockpiled the meat and they didn't have freezers. If people will just roll over and let the government stop them from working and enjoying life, the delay of one election because of a few elderly and infirm who should be dead but for medical intervention and extreme costs, if people will do that, they will acquiesce to every election being postponed. The Democrats begging our president to invoke war powers against a virus actually were stupid enough to think that this natural culling of the herd of those that should already be dead was about getting reelected. This country has had health epidemics throughout history. It's had typhoid, it's had tuberculosis, and most like polio, were more devastating to all people than COVID-19. Yet none of the legislative members in the past in our government have ever pleaded for the president to assume military control and power of the entire country. The solution of the coronavirus problem created by the government is to let the coronavirus be the solution. The elderly were not meant to live forever, and there is no benefit to society to sacrifice the youth and future of the country and the planet and enslave the vital population to keep the almost dead from dying. Disease culls herds. Coronavirus is not typhoid, it's not polio. COVID-19 is targeting only those who are a burden on the living. Let the coronavirus do what the politicians are trying to stop, which is let life be for the living. C.S. Lewis, in the Screwtape Letters, noted that human beings believe in the devil's propaganda, that life is the greatest good and death the greatest evil. Those taken in this epidemic or pandemic should have died years ago, but for the great cost that we have spent to keep them alive. We let these people who are a burden to the rest of us, we let them die because they would have died anyway. We ban the funeral directors and funeral parlors from pumping chemicals into them to keep them preserved. We don't want these people preserved. We don't want the dead carcasses preserved to keep a monument to even more waste. What we do with them is we put them in incinerators that produce energy and we burn them. And this way, their dead bodies will provide the living energy and they will provide something useful to society. Life is for the living, and don't you let the government tell you otherwise.